Brothers and sisters, welcome to our day 8 of our Advent series reflections. Today we're going to reflect upon how walking in the Holy Spirit by being faithful to the Holy Spirit leads to a certain expansiveness of heart, you could say, to a certain docility in our being to expand, to receive more and more of the graces. We said that when we are faithful to the graces of God, the saints tell us that God will give us greater graces. So the opposite is true. If we squander God's graces, we don't follow the impulses of the Holy Spirit, sometimes we stagnate. Sometimes we find ourselves lukewarm. Sometimes we find ourselves, joyless or without peace, or, we find ourselves anxious. We find ourselves in many ways. Now, all these areas have to be discerned, but the point is, one of the ways in which we can experience dryness of spirit is not necessarily the deep purifications that the mystics speak about, but the fact that we could just be lukewarm, the fact that we could be resisting God. So we don't have the joy of living in the Spirit, the joy of sacrificing for the Spirit, of following His promptings, even if at times it makes us look foolish, if at times the Lord asks us demanding things. St. Therese of Lisieux says that at first, even though that the demands of the Holy Spirit, these promptings to do things for the Lord, could be difficult, the more we're accustomed to responding to this faithfulness, then the more we will grow in joy, and it will become sort of natural. It will become second nature, which is what virtue establishes in the souls. Virtue becomes a sort of a second nature way of acting in good ways. There are many virtues, but the point is that the way of walking with the Spirit expands the heart and fills it with a certain joy and happiness. It's the joy of what Jesus said. There's more joy in giving than in receiving. And that's it. Faithfulness of the Holy Spirit is faithful to all the moments of love, the little moments of love throughout the day, or the things, recognizing the needs of our neighbor that we could respond to. And to respond to that will bring with us a certain joy in the gift of self, which is at the heart of the Christian message. And so, as the faithfulness in us grows and God gives us greater graces, our hearts, as I said, will expand to receive more and more of the Holy Spirit, who is the joy of God, who is the love of God. And so God rewards us generously, but only in the way that only God can know how to. God cannot be outdone in His generosity. God's generosity surpasses the generosity of anyone. And so he knows how to trace out for us a path of freedom as well. So when we learn to respond well to the Holy Spirit, and we become so attuned to the Holy Spirit, or at least we try to be faithful to the Holy Spirit, that when the wind blows, and we don't know often where the wind blows or how it blows, Jesus said, but because we don't know at times the kind of promptings the Lord will give us today, and the things He will ask of us that we know He's asking of us in our heart to do. But these could be difficult, they could be surprising at times. But if we're willing to go with it, then we walk in a certain freedom, because deep down we know that freedom exists when we're detached from sin. We know that we're free when we're not enslaved to our passions, when we're not enslaved to our selfishness, our lack of love. Freedom is the death of self, the death of selfishness. And then one is free to do even difficult things. One is free to love. One is free to follow the Lord with ease. And so the faithfulness of the Holy Spirit, practicing it in little things, will, as we've been saying, will lead to bigger things. But the point is, there should be developing us a certain ease and a flow, if you wish. And when the Holy Spirit comes to prompt us, the Spirit will give us every grace we need to fulfill what the Spirit asks of us. So everything the Lord asks, it will always be accompanied by the grace to do what He asks. And we know that the Holy Spirit is known as the consoler and the comforter, and that the Holy Spirit, when He gives us these demanding requests, sometimes will fill our hearts with joy to do this and to be able to give ourselves. Often the lack of joy is diminished because of our resistance, because of our selfishness. But, the Holy Spirit has an infinite capacity to help us share in God's infinite joy and His peace. And so the Spirit brings this, and it brings us solace and a peace that the world cannot give. This walking in the Spirit, this faithfulness to the Holy Spirit brings such a joy and a freedom that it trumps everything that that the world offers. It's only by experience do we know this. It's only by experience can we, put this into action, and experience confirms what we're talking about. Richard of St. Victor, a great theologian in the church, says, I boldly affirm that one single drop of these divine consolations of the Holy Spirit can do what all the pleasures of the world cannot. The pleasures of this world cannot satisfy the heart, and one single drop of the inner sweetness that the Holy Spirit pours into the soul delights it utterly and causes it a holy inebriation. And so, this is the kind of unction of the Spirit that we want to walk in by being faithful to the Holy Spirit. It's what St. Faustina traced out, that this is the path to holiness. This is the shortest path to holiness.